Hello, Kyle here. I recently went on 2 camping trips in 2 weekends, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of compare my two main cameras, my old D600 and my new Z6 that's filming this right now. I've been shooting with this D600 for over 6 years, I think. I love this camera, and I thought it would be really hard to let it go, but I've got to admit, after 15 minutes of handling the Z6, it felt natural in my hand. After being used to carrying the Z6 all the time, this camera just feels so huge and chunky. Like, look how friggin' thick that base is. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. The Z6 feels like an old school film SLR with a grip. It's like perfect. Nikon's mirrorless cameras get a lot of flack for their supposed poor autofocus, but the old school cameras are very loud. And there's a definite moment where it stops and you have that audible feedback and the click, and you can kind of feel the vibrations. So it makes it incredibly obvious when focus is locked. Where I find the Z cameras, that autofocus, it's so fast and so smooth. It's not so much that the cameras have trouble focusing. I think it's photographers have a little bit of trouble recognizing when the camera has locked focus. I find that's another big learning curve. It's just a decade of knowledge with one system out the window and having to learn another one. The human eye sees color and low light very differently than a camera does. And with the mirrorless camera, I'm seeing what the sensor's seeing, so it makes things like the sky and the color balance and all that stuff far more obvious, where this keeps me kind of guessing and thinking a lot more. I was shooting a lot of pictures that were silhouettes. There were people, and the way the light and the scenery was, I kind of had to shoot with the sun behind them, which means, you have to tell your camera to overexpose so you can actually get some detail in the faces and blow out the background, because who cares, it's just a background. This camera, that's a lot of guessing involved. It's not like mirrorless where you can see their faces and you just know you've got it right just by looking at the image. And then when I did some golden hour shots, sunset shots, just a lot of it is rules of thumb, like, oh, I want a silhouette underexposed by 2 stops to get that nice, bold, colorful sunset shot. With this, I used my standard travel set where I have my 50mm prime and my 14mm prime, whereas with the Z6 I brought the 24-70 zoom. I felt very limited on the wide end, but it was nice having a little more long end, especially with switching between DX crop mode and full frame mode. Again, on this camera it's a horrible experience because you're still looking through an optical viewfinder, so you have no idea exactly where those ends are. Where with the Z6, it's just so intuitive, it just, bam, you see what the camera sees. It's wonderful. The biggest trouble I had with the Z6 was actually not a problem with the Z6 itself, but a problem with me. I know that I can get about 2,000 shots on this thing on a single battery, where this thing is only rated for, I think, 310 shots, I believe, which in practice works out to about 600 shots. I did have 3 batteries packed with me. I only ended up going through 1, but I still just had that voice in the back of my head. It was almost like the film days where you realize how many pictures you can shoot is limited, so every shot is precious. Where I really don't feel that with this camera. I can just click away happily and not have to think about it. I really love doing time-lapse photography. My DSLR has a mechanical aperture, which causes time-lapse captured on this thing to look incredibly flickery and awful, whereas the Z6, it has an electronically controlled aperture, which is far more accurate, and it also has software that can smooth out exposures. It also works out well having the histogram while I'm setting up a long time-lapse sunset. I can overexpose it without getting clipping when there still is sunlight, to maximize how much light I'll have towards the very end of the shoot. Where with this camera, again, I'm relying on the light meter and going, well, maybe I can overexpose by about a stop. So going forward, I will definitely stick with my Z6 on camping trips. Plus it's all weather sealed, so I'll be, I don't know, this video turned out a lot more rambly than I was expecting it. This is why I usually write up a little bit of list of notes before I do a video instead of just sitting down and going. What else was there? So yeah, if you've recently made the switch to mirrorless and taken it on a experience that you normally do with your DSLR, what kind of changes did you notice? How did you find it? Give me your thoughts. Let me know. Thanks for watching.